This episode is brought to you by Vital Farms. Isn't it bullshit to have to question where your food comes from? At Vital Farms, you can trace your pasture-raised eggs all the way back to the source, the pasture. On the side of each pasture-raised carton of eggs, you'll find the name of the farm where your eggs were laid. And when you look the farm up on their website, you'll get a peek at all the sunshine, fresh air, and open space the hens enjoy. Learn more and find out where to buy them at vitalfarms.com. Vital Farms, keeping it bullshit-free.
This episode is brought to you by Kia's first three-row all-electric SUV, the Kia EV9, with available all-wheel drive and seating for up to 7 adults, with a 0 to 60 speed that thrills you 1 minute, and available reclining lounge seats that unwind you the next. Visit kia.com/EV9 to learn more. Ask your Kia dealer for availability. No system, no matter how advanced, can compensate for all driver error and or driving conditions. Always drive safely.
Welcome to the Human Capital Innovations Podcast. We're your source for personal, professional, and organizational growth and development, where we share original research, explore industry trends, and interview executives and thought leaders from across the globe. We hope you join us often for practitioner-oriented content around all things related to leadership, HR, talent management, organizational development, and change management. Maximize your personal and organizational potential with Human Capital Innovations Podcast. Do you enjoy the Human Capital Innovations Podcast? Please subscribe, leave a review, comment, share, and consider supporting the podcast on Patreon, even at the producer and sponsorship levels. Welcome to the Human Capital Innovations Podcast. In this HCI podcast episode, I talk with Emily Sander about hacking executive leadership. Emily Sander, welcome to the Human Capital Innovations Podcast.
Thanks for having me, John.
It is a pleasure to be with you. I'm super excited to have a nice conversation with you about your book, Hacking Executive Leadership. It's going to be a lot of fun to unpack that and to explore the different components of that. As we get started, I wanted to share Emily's bio with everybody. Emily Sander is a C-suite executive and founder of the Next Level Coaching. As an ICF-Certified Coach, she guides clients towards new perspectives that enable them to adapt and evolve as leaders. She is the author of the book, Hacking Executive Leadership. And I could go on and on and on about your experience, your background, but I'll turn it over to you, give you a chance to share anything else about yourself that you would like listeners to know about your background or personal context.
Certainly. Well, I started my career, I grew up in Seattle, Washington. So I started my career in little companies like Microsoft and Amazon. I was actually one of the testers for the first version of the Kindle device. So that was fun early on and to see that progress. And then I worked through a series of small to medium businesses and rapid growth phases. And that's where I cut my teeth into leadership, led teams, scaled teams globally, worked my way up into executive leadership, and now serve as chief of staff for a digital marketing agency. And I'm also an executive leadership coach, as you mentioned. So I have that practice going on as well.
Very cool. So you stay very busy and are doing lots of really cool work. So that's fantastic. And I failed to mention at the beginning, I believe, but you're joining us today from Florida. I'm south of Salt Lake City in Utah. And this is going to be a great conversation. And I do some work in the coaching space as well, which is super fun and rewarding. And finding ways to tie in scholarly research with professional practice and helping others figure out how to be more effective and impactful in the work that they do. That's a passion that I hold. And so I'm super excited to learn more about how you approach this in your work. So as we get started, why don't you give us kind of the foundation for this book, the why behind the book? Why now? Why this book? Why this topic?
Sure. So the short answer is COVID. I always had a book in the back of my mind as a one-day activity, and then COVID hit. Lockdown was scary and serious, and then it was boring. And so I decided to do something productive with my time. So I took the time to make a book. And so Hacking Executive Leadership is a combination of my 15 plus years in the business world and my personal experience there, combined with my coaching and the discussions I've had with clients and the lessons I've learned there. And it's a culmination of all those things. And I've been told, I've gotten feedback, it's an easy to read, straightforward book, and it's a fun read. So a lot of leadership books can be dry and academic. And this one is practical and tactical and has good frameworks and concepts people can apply right away. And you can read it on a long plane ride. You mentioned I'm in Florida. I have family in Seattle. So when I go back on that flight for 6 hours, I can knock down a quick book. So that's Hacking Executive Leadership. And hopefully it helps people.
Yeah, well, thank you. And I just want to note the importance of having content out there that is accessible and digestible by the average leader, right? And so you have a lot of really good work that's out there, but it's really academic. And I say that as an academic. I'm a professor. I do a lot of academic research, scholarly journals, that sort of stuff. I've done books that are very academic, and that has its role. It serves its purpose.
Sure.
But in terms of getting the water to the end of the row and like actually having impact in the world of work and in business, we need stuff that's more easily understandable and applicable, right, to just everyone who's practicing all of this and trying to just be better. And so this has been a focus of mine in recent years, really over the last 3 or 4 years. I still do my academic work, but I've tried to pivot a bit and do more scholar practitioner work where I translate the scholarly work into more practitioner oriented kind of style. And some of my recent books, are the same. Like I try to make them very digestible, with key points. That it's still well researched, but it's easy to get through. It's easy to figure out and to see yourself in it and to apply the principles. And I know that's what you do in your book. And I think there's just a huge, huge need for that. We often, and it's a false dichotomy, but there's often either stuff that's so dry and dense, academic stuff, or stuff that's kind of just fluffy, whatever the trend of the day is stuff. And both of those, serve a certain purpose, but I like to try to shoot for somewhere in the middle where we can have research-based,
right,
evidence-based work that also tells a compelling story that also will really help people take a good hard look at themselves and see how they can make improvements. So again, I applaud you for your work and for this book. And I also can relate to the COVID comment. I think probably many of us can. Over the last 2 years, I think many of us have tried new things just due to the fact that we were in lockdown. We were bored. We had time, and certainly I have had some of that experience myself. And in fact, this very podcast is an outcome of COVID, because I just wanted to. I miss the interactions. I miss the conversations with people where I wasn't traveling anymore, and it's been super rewarding. So again, thank you for joining me. Now let's start to unpack the book. Like, what are some of those key components and elements that you would like to highlight for me and my listeners today?
Sure. So the book is full of frameworks. And so I'll tell the concept. There's visuals in the book. I'm a visual learner, but I'll try to describe them. So the first one is 3 circles. And you can picture 3 circles in a horizontal line. They're a math equation. It's an easy one. Circle 1 plus circle 2 equals circle 3. And this framework helps you make decisions and helps you define your favorable outcome. So the example that I like to give is, let me explain how the framework works. So circle 1 is an external event that lands in your lap or comes across your desk in your inbox. And this can be something like you're at a team meeting and you're leading the team meeting, and all of a sudden, Joe over here decides to get angry and have an outburst and start yelling and derailing the meeting. So that's your external event in circle 1. And so you actually skip to the end of circle 3. And circle 3 is your desired outcome. What do I want to have happen in this situation? So you skip to circle 3 and say, what do I want to have happen here? And let's say circle 3 in this case is, I want to acknowledge Joe and maybe pull out some kernels of truth of what he's saying, but get people refocused and realigned and back on topic in this meeting. And then you do a reverse engineer step to circle 2. And that is where you come in. So what do I need to say? What do I need to not say? What do I need to do or not do? How do I need to show up, et cetera, to try to get myself and this team to circle 3. And so it could be something like, Joe, I hear you. I know that project's really important to you. You've brought that up several times. We actually have that on the meeting agenda for today. It takes budget allocation, and we want to talk about that and make sure it's going to work for everyone. But I hear you. It's important to all of us, and we're going to get to that in the back half of this meeting. And that's what you do externally. Now, internally, you could feel like shouting at Joe, like, Joe, like, we've talked about this 12 times. This budget isn't your call, buddy. Like, hey, come on. But the 3 circles framework helps you build out, okay, what just happened? What do I want to have happen? An important step. And then what do I need to do, say, in circle 2 to make that happen?
Yeah, I like that simple framework. It's super effective. In fact, I've been coaching someone just over the last week who's dealing with a really challenging internal organizational issue. And that simple framework, I haven't used that explicitly because that's not, explicitly how I've, framed up in my own thinking. But as you're describing that, I'm like, oh, that's basically what I'm doing with him to try to help walk him through, what the desired outcome is and the most impactful way to get to that desired outcome. Because his inclination is to try to steamroll his way to an outcome, which will almost guarantee that he can't get to that outcome. And so, there's some ego there. There's some arrogance and some stubbornness, that he needs to be able to let go of. And it ultimately doesn't really matter whether, he's right or not. What matters is the effectiveness of, being able to accomplish what you want to accomplish and to get done what you want to get done. And so that means you got to finesse the situation. You got to deal with the relationships, and, just calling people out in a public setting often, almost always, is not the best way to do that, right?
As a leader, people take their cues from you, and you are managing to an outcome and a result. So absolutely. And just one other quick note on that, you can use that 3 circles proactively as well. So I gave a reactive in the moment situation. Let's say you're going into a team meeting and maybe a whole bunch of change is happening in the market or in your industry or company. And you say, okay, external event, I have a team meeting coming up. What is my favorable outcome? I want people to calm down and get focused and help their teams get focused. And so, okay, I need to lay out the information that I know and let people know and be explicit about, here's the things we need to focus on. I know there's a lot of distractions. I know there's a lot of unknowns, but here's the things that we can control. And here's the things we need to focus on, and let our teams know that they need to focus on. So another example.
Check out my new book, The Future Leader, Creating and Transforming Next-Gen Organizations. Stemming from 2 decades of professional experience and over 600 in-depth interviews with executives, thought leaders, and scholars from across the globe, The Future Leader will help you explore the ordinary, everyday actions that will help you to prepare to lead in the future of work, to respond to an uncertain future, and to produce extraordinary results for individuals, teams, and organizations. Welcome to the Human Capital Innovations Academy. Courses, micro-credentials, and certificates to upskill and reskill for the future of work. All HCI Academy courses, micro-credentials, and certificates are designed, developed, and delivered by award-winning and internationally renowned scholars, educators, thought leaders, executives, and practitioners. Our courses, micro-credentials, and certificates will help you make your mark on the future of work and make an immediate impact in your organizations. Check out the HCI Academy and our many course offerings and certificates to upskill and reskill for the future of work. Check out our new weekly LinkedIn newsletter, Alchemizing Human Capital. exploring industry trends via original research and interviews with executives and thought leaders from across the globe. We look forward to having you join us. Other key frameworks that you would like to highlight?
Yeah, for sure. There's the failure loop, which people like a lot. So failure has a very negative connotation in our world. So you're a failure or you failed at something. That's not something you typically want to go for. In the book, I have a diagram, but I'll explain it really quickly to your listeners. It's a chain of loops, so individual loops connected in a chain, and it goes up and to the right, and that's the direction of progress. However, in one part of an individual loop, it goes back down into the left, and that's the opposite direction of progress. And so this is a great framework for thinking about failure in a different way. So taking the traditional sense of failure and throwing that out and saying, I can change a quote unquote failure event into progress by using this. And so how it works is you mess up at a presentation, it doesn't go the way you wanted to, or a decision you made doesn't result in the thing you wanted to have happen. You go, oh my goodness, I'm so embarrassed. I have to admit to myself and my friends that I have egg on my face and kind of fell down in front of everyone. That's the failure event. That's when you're going back down into the left on the individual loop. It feels crappy. In that moment, it's the gut punch. It doesn't feel good. And you can stop there and declare yourself a failure and drown in your pools of pessimism, or you can take the learning and lesson from that and apply it going forward. And when you do that, you propel yourself to the next individual loop. So you propel yourself up and to the right. And therefore, you've just made progress. And if you think about the definition of learning and growing and improving, it is this process. And so if you take this framework and number one, just know where you are in the process, that can be helpful by itself. Hey, it feels real crappy here, but I know where I am in the process. That helps alleviate it. And then step two is, okay, let me dig in and say, what could I have done differently? Or what is something I can try differently next time, and actually do that. And you've just grown and improved. And this becomes a mark of a successful person instead of being a mark of quote unquote failure.
Well, shopping for a car?
Yep, Carvana made financing a car as smooth as can be.
Oh, yeah?
I got pre-qualified instantly and had real terms personalized just for me.
Doesn't get much smoother than that.
Well, I got to browse thousands of car options on Carvana, all within my budget.
Doesn't get much smoother than that.
It does. I actually wanted a car that seemed out of my range, but I was able to add a cosigner and found my dream car.
It doesn't get much...
Oh, it gets smoother. It's getting delivered tomorrow.
Visit Carvana.com or download the app to get pre-qualified today.
Yeah, I love that. And it should be an ongoing process, right? So I like, diagrams and conceptions of this process where we see it. I often think of it as kind of this upward trending spiral, right? Hopefully, if we're going in the right direction. But as you mentioned, it can go the other way too, depending on how we think about learning and growth and experimentation and iteration and all of those things. And so, fostering a climate of continuous learning with growth mindset, abundance mindset, and focusing in your team on innovation culture, creativity culture, all those sorts of things, that's going to go a long way. And just having simple frameworks like this to help kind of diagram out what that process looks like, where you're at in that process is super important. And I know it's not directly related to what you were just saying, but I couldn't help but think I've done a decent amount of work just looking at, because I do some academic work and some teaching at the university in ethical decision making in the workplace, and so there's different moral and ethical there's theories and frameworks of moral and ethical development, cognitive development, and a lot of people will go through transitions that are really just part of the process. It's part of the stage, and everyone pretty much goes through it. Yet when you're going through it, it kind of rocks your world. It's super uncomfortable. You're dealing with a lot of dissonance. A lot of times people want to just kind of go back to what's known and what's comfortable and what they're used to. And helping people to recognize, no, this is actually a natural part of progression. This is where you're at. It kind of sucks. This is where you're going. It's going to be better. That's really helpful. And so, I think about that in these other theories and these other frameworks. I think it relates well to what you're talking about. And the bottom line is, we're all going through that lifelong journey, hopefully, of lifelong learning and growth and development. And if we ever stagnate, and we just feel like we've arrived, that's a recipe for failure, right?
Right. I mean, if you want to be safe and comfortable your whole life, you can do that. You just don't do anything. You don't put yourself out there. You don't try anything new. But if you want to continue to be on your growth edge, which is one step outside of your comfort zone, not miles ahead, don't sprint out in front because you'll get snapped back like a rubber band. But if you take one step outside, it'll feel a little uncomfortable and you might not do something perfectly because it might be your first time doing something new. But again, if you get to become friends with that feeling and say, oh, yep, this is my old friend and I know where I am in the process, and you use it and move up the chain of loops, and you do that your entire life, you are going to be a very successful person. You're going to be putting yourself out there. You're going to be trying new things, being innovative, growing as a leader, growing in your connections with others. And so I think you're right. People stop because it feels bad. And I get it, because sometimes it's like, oof, I got to sit down. I got to take a break, take a breather, but then let me get back up again and put myself out there.
Yeah. And there's no problem with taking a break and taking a breather and resetting and recalibrating. And especially if you have a big life disappointment or huge disruption, like, practice self-care. Like there's a time and a place for all that. But what you're saying is we're not going to get stuck in it. We're not going to ruminate in it endlessly. We're not going to get complacent and just say, I'm in a good place, and honestly, I'm early 40s and I've had a fair amount of success in my career. And I probably could kind of just coast for the next 25 years into retirement and have a pretty, meaningful and what people would deem a successful life, work life and everything. And that, while I say that, though, that sounds so incredibly boring.
Not in you. Yeah, I can see it.
I'm like, oh, that just makes me sad. And not, everyone's different. I get that. And so we're not suggesting everyone has to be like on this rocket ship trajectory of, and be like uber ambitious and all that. Like, I'm not suggesting that at all, but yeah, don't get comfortable and don't get too comfortable, too complacent. Let's push ourselves to grow and learn. And that may not mean the next rung up in the organization at work. That may mean you want to pick up a new hobby, try a new language, travel the world and experience new cultures. Like there's a lot of different ways this could play out, but ultimately you just want to make sure that you're not stagnant.
Absolutely. I think that's so important. What you said too is apply common sense, apply judgment. If you're at one point in your career or life, I've had clients who have young children and, they're doing it on their own. And so their priorities have to be different. And so what their goals are and what their priorities are appropriately different for them. And then when they move into a different stage, they have another set of goals and aspirations. That's perfectly fine. And the things you mentioned, like traveling, learning a new language, to me, that's not stagnating. It's expanding your horizons and learning from different areas of your life. So I think your point is well taken. Take care of yourself. That's not selfish. And apply what is a reasonable pace for yourself.
Yeah. And I'll also just note before we go on to the next framework that creativity and innovation happens as we start to connect disparate areas, right? So sometimes someone comes up with a brand new transformational idea that's completely mind-blowing, completely changing our paradigm around the world. That does happen. But most of the time, innovation is actually just taking two existing things that, two or more existing things and seeing it in a new way where you can combine and have these things complement each other to create some new cool product or service or something that's going to better the lives of people around you. And what better way to do that than to have a robust and healthy life where we have different elements of our life. So we're not siloed, we're not stuck into one narrow perspective, but we can see a whole variety of things. And then we can start to make those mental connections in new and creative ways that maybe no one's ever, thought of before. That's innovation. And so much of the really cool stuff that comes out of organizations or that individuals do in their lives comes through that cross-pollination of disparate ideas in different domains that get brought together. And then all of a sudden you realize, oh, that's really cool. We can do something cool with that.
Absolutely. I love that, which is a perfect segue into the next framework, which is called Swizzle. That's a word I actually made up, but it is a way of being resourceful and being creative and problem solving in different ways. And so the example I love to give here is when I was listening to a podcast with Floyd Mayweather, who's a champion boxer. And I know nothing about boxing. You don't want to see me box anyone anytime, but they were interviewing him saying, hey, what makes you the best? Is it your training? Is it your diet? Is it your footwork or how quick your hands are? And they were pressing him. And he eventually said, no, it's my adaptability. I can adapt to any opponent, any round, and any punch better than anyone else. And that's what makes me the champion. And I heard that and a light bulb went off. And again, I know nothing about boxing, but I said, I can apply that to my world in business and to my team meetings and my interactions with people and how I'm communicating with different individuals and being adaptable. And we can take that at the macro level to the market fluctuations and our industry and the politics going on in our company. And so that's a great example of what you were talking about, which is exactly right. Pulling from all areas of life and cross-pollinating and just opening your mind up to that creative problem solving and innovation.
Very, very cool. And I like the word too. It's a lot of fun. Well, excellent. Emily, we've really just scratched the surface of your book, but there's so much great stuff there. And I really do encourage listeners to check it out. Before we wrap up our conversation for today, I just wanted to give you a chance to share with listeners how they can get connected with you, find out more about your work, where they can find your book, and then give us the final word on the topic for today.
Certainly. The book Hacking Executive Leadership is on Amazon. There's an Audible version. There's a Kindle version, whatever you prefer. It's wherever books are sold, Hacking Executive Leadership. And if you want to find out more about me or get some free downloads, you can go to my website, which is nextlevel.coach. So nextlevel, all one word, .coach. And you have some great information there. And the thing I leave you with, or your listeners with, is incremental progress is a lifelong journey, and small wins add up faster than you think.
I love it. I love it. Wonderful, Emily. Thank you so much for joining me. Again, I encourage listeners to reach out, get connected, find out more about what Emily and her team can do for you. And as always, I hope everyone can stay healthy and safe, that you can find meaning and purpose at work each and every day. And I hope you all have a great week. Bluer Than Indigo Leadership, the journey of becoming a truly remarkable leader. Early in my adult life, I learned about an Asian proverb that translates as bluer than indigo. If you think about the color indigo, it is a brilliant, deep, and vibrant blue, what some would call the bluest of blues. To have something that is bluer than indigo is rare and truly remarkable. Contrary to popular myth, there is no one-size-fits-all or cookie-cutter approach to effective leadership. There is no silver bullet, no secret sauce, no go-to model that will solve all of your problems. The truth is, great leaders have all had their unique strengths and flaws, and have all had to discover and then pave their own distinctive path in their life's journey to fulfill their leadership potential. Bluer Than Indigo Leadership will help you discover your own path and explore those ordinary, everyday actions that will help you respond to an uncertain future and produce extraordinary results for your individuals, teams, and organizations. Check out Human Capital Innovations magazine, Human Capital Leadership. Human Capital Leadership is a free, interactive e-magazine with the mission to help individuals, leaders, and organizations find innovative approaches to maximize their human capital potential. We publish issues quarterly in August, November, February, and May. Take a look at the latest issue and let us know what you think. The alchemy of truly remarkable leadership. Ordinary, everyday actions that produce extraordinary results. Consider how the nature of work has shifted over the past 50 years. With increased globalization, rapid technological advancement, and the shift in economic composition, the average job of today looks very different than the average job of 50 years ago. What will the jobs and organizations of tomorrow look like? Moreover, what does this all mean for organizational leaders? What are the core competencies and capabilities of organizations and their leadership that are prepared for continued disruption and geopolitical and socioeconomic shifts? Regardless of what the future holds, increasingly, leaders need to be socially minded, data-driven, decisive, champions of talent, and disruptors of the traditional notions of leadership, teams, organizations, and work. The alchemy of truly remarkable leadership will help you to explore your own leadership competencies and capabilities and consider ways to apply and implement them into your workplace and personal life. Do you enjoy the Human Capital Innovations podcast? Please subscribe, leave a review, comment, share, and consider supporting the podcast on Patreon, even at the producer and sponsorship levels. Thanks again for joining us for this episode of the Human Capital Innovations podcast. I hope you stay healthy and safe and that you have a great week.